Falling for Water, is influenced by her life along a river in Canada where she could see salmon swimming past. Francesca Cairns is here to tell us about the book, the strong lead Kayla, and how it was inspired by a place she once called home and her own fascinating life. Good morning to you, Francesca.
Good morning to you, Lucy.
Now, Francesca, I've briefly mentioned your beautiful life in Canada along a river where you could see salmon swimming past, but could you take us back, in your words, to that cabin in Canada that was inspiration for the book Falling for Water? Whereabouts was it?
Okay, so we took a bit of a wild adventure and bought a cabin sight unseen over the internet on a remote river in the northern part of Newfoundland. And it was, we didn't realise at the time, but it was actually one of the fairly major salmon spawning rivers on the island. And the island is very mindful and aware of the gift of their salmon. And so we were lucky enough to be on a river that's been very much preserved for its salmon life and the importance that it plays in the whole production of them.
In Australia, you'd previously lived in the desert. How different an experience was it living in Canada where, you know, you're right next to a river, you're seeing salmon, I'm assuming swimming upstream if they're in their spawning phase. What did that do to your mind?
Well, I'd spent 10 years as a young person in Central Australia where I truly fell in love with the desert and the wilderness of that. But from the moment I landed in Newfoundland, which is like walking in a land that's a series of ponds and lakes and waterholes held together by a lacework of peat land. It's moisture personified. It's like you breathe it into your lungs, you breathe it into every pore of your body in a way that you almost cannot do in Australia, even in Tasmania.
Francesca Cairns here. We are talking about her latest book, Falling for Water, which was inspired by that place that she used to call home in Canada, right by the river. You're also listening to me on your Sunday program, Lucie Cutting, on 936 ABC Hobart, ABC Northern Tasmania. Francesca, you moved back to Australia, but you came to Tasmania. I mean, was that quite influenced by that lifestyle in Canada of living by a river and being in a much more cool climate?
Yes, very much so. We actually travelled to and from Newfoundland over a decade and spent several years living on the remote river and in remote villages. And really, when we came back to Australia, we were looking for a way to fall back in love with it because we'd kind of lost our taste for the heat and the Otways. Even the Otways in Victoria was getting to 45 degrees and catastrophic fire risks over summer. And so when we arrived back in Australia, a shack came up in the Central Highlands of Tasmania where they have snow and ice, which we had become so attached to, and so we disappeared into there for the first couple of years of COVID, which was an absolutely brilliant place to be.
Tell me a bit more about your book now. So the book is called Falling for Water, and this was a release you had out last year. It has a very strong female lead, and it being International Women's Day, I think we should spend a moment talking about Kayla. How did you develop that character?
Well, I started writing it actually in the cabin in Newfoundland because I was surrounded by water. Water was everything in our lives. We were sourcing our food from it. We were travelling on it, and what it reminded me of more than anything was the magic of water and our relationship to it, and the way that water connects us to everything on earth. It is absolutely essential to our well-being. We're hugely made up from it. we come into a life, we live a life, we return to the earth. The earth is sort of eternal, and water comes and goes in the same way. And there's so many things about water that are important for us to perhaps think about as the way we look at our lives. Water is always drawn to water. And when it comes together, it's always stronger. I mean, that in itself is a very simple life philosophy, but there it is. A drop becomes a trickle, becomes a stream, becomes a river, and returns to the ocean. And as we know, as we're seeing in the floods, it's a very powerful force.
And something that's incredibly important to that character, Kayla, in the book Falling for Water, which people will learn her connection to water is such a driver for the story. This is Francesca Cairns, Northwest author of Falling for Water, and we are talking about the book, but also Francesca's own incredible life. Francesca, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention that you're a legislation changer. What was your experience that led to laws being changed?
Well, I as a young person, I went up to Alice Springs, and that was back in the early 70s, and it was a fairly wild and woolly town back there, but the opportunity to sort of step into any door that opened, it was a bit of a frontier town still, I suppose, and one of the opportunities that came up for me was I'd been working in a children's village and working on grounds and maintenance and working on machinery, and as a result I got offered a job as a grader driver, which I found a bit irresistible, to head off in the bush for up to 26 days at a time, which is my kind of life, and so I went out and started working, but unfortunately the management of the roads department found having a woman working out there was contrary to all acceptable patterns, so my employers were threatened to not be paid if they kept me out there. So in the end I got fired from that job, or laid off, and so I sort of felt the wrongness of this and sent letters around the country to newspapers and the Ombudsman in South Australia. And then I got offered a job working in South Australia on graders, which I took up for about a year. And after that, the laws had changed. They couldn't stop me, and I went back and worked around Horseshoe Bend in the Northern Territory.
I can see, Francesca. Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say I can see some of your own life story coming into that character Kayla, in Falling for Water, and your determination to change things, which comes across in the book too. We're quickly heading towards the 12 o'clock news, but I just wanted to get mention in of any events that you have for the book that people can attend. Yeah, sure.
Well, I have a web page called francairns.com, which people are welcome to contact me at. But also I'll be featured writer at the Northwest Tasmania Eco Fest that's coming up in April. I'm also talking to the Women Writers, the Society of Women Writers of Tasmania, and the Book Council of Lucie Cutting. Deloraine Market, just to name a few.